Emily Carter had always lived a quiet life. She wasn't the kind of person who looked for attention or tried to impress anyone. In fact, most people barely noticed her at all. She worked as a waitress at a small diner just outside a sleepy town, where nothing much ever happened. The diner was old, with worn-out booths, a creaky wooden floor, and a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked in years. Locals came there for their morning coffee, greasy breakfasts, and the comfort of routine. Emily served them all with a tired but gentle smile, moving quickly from table to table with pots of coffee and plates of pancakes. She had been working there for almost 5 years. Every morning, she tied her faded blue apron around her waist, tucked her brown hair into a messy bun, and stepped into the same rhythm of taking orders, clearing dishes, and cleaning tables. The tips were small, and the hours were long. Her feet always ached at the end of the day, but she never complained. She needed the job. She had bills to pay, an old apartment to keep, and barely enough to get by each month. Dreams weren't something she could afford anymore. But there was something most people didn't know about Emily, something hidden deep inside her, like a beautiful song trapped in a locked music box. Before her father passed away, he used to play the piano every night. Emily would sit beside him, watching his fingers dance across the keys. He wasn't a famous musician or anything. He just loved music. And he taught Emily everything he knew. She learned how to read notes, how to move her hands, how to feel the music instead of just playing it. By the time she was 12, she could play almost anything he handed her. Classical pieces, jazz tunes, even songs they made up together. The piano had been their special world, a quiet place where everything made sense. But when her father died suddenly in a car accident, that world vanished. The piano sat untouched in the corner of their small living room. Her mother couldn't bear to hear it anymore. The sound reminded her too much of the man she had lost. Eventually, they had to sell it to pay for bills. Emily never played again. As she grew older, life pulled her away from music. She had to work after school, help her mother, and later move out on her own. There were always things more urgent than dreams: rent, food, survival. Still, every now and then, when she heard a piece of music in a movie or on the radio, something stirred inside her. She'd hum along quietly while washing dishes or walking to work, fingers tapping imaginary keys on the table. But no one ever noticed. The diner had a dusty old upright piano sitting in the corner near the window. It hadn't been played in years. No one remembered why it was even there. Some said it belonged to the original owner's wife, who used to entertain guests on weekends before business slowed down. Now it was more like furniture, a place where napkins or ketchup bottles sometimes ended up by accident. Emily often looked at it while wiping down the tables. Part of her wanted to lift the cover and try a note, but she never did. What if someone laughed? What if the keys didn't work? What if she'd forgotten how to play? Her routine never changed. She opened the diner at 6 a.m., brewed coffee, flipped the chairs down, and waited for the early morning regulars to trickle in. The same old men came in for their bacon and eggs, the same mothers with their toddlers, the same tired truckers passing through. Emily greeted them all the same way, with kindness, patience, and that small, tired smile. They liked her, but they didn't know her. No one asked about her past. No one ever wondered what else she could do. Then one rainy Thursday changed everything. It was one of those gray, cold mornings where everything felt heavier. The rain tapped softly against the diner windows, and the sky looked like it had forgotten how to be blue. Emily had barely slept the night before. Her landlord had called to remind her that rent was due, and she'd been trying to figure out how to stretch the little money she had left. She forced herself through the shift, pretending everything was fine. Around 11 a.m., when the lunch crowd hadn't yet arrived, a man walked in who didn't look like he belonged. He wore a long dark coat, black boots, and a watch that probably cost more than Emily's entire apartment. His hair was neatly combed, and he carried himself like someone who didn't wait in lines. Emily noticed him right away. Everyone did, but no one said anything. He took a seat in the corner booth near the window and opened a sleek black notebook. His eyes scanned the room as if he was quietly judging every detail. Emily walked over to his table with her notepad. "Morning," she said politely. "Coffee?" He looked up and smiled. It was a friendly smile, not the cold kind she expected. "Yes, please. Black." She poured the coffee, took his order, and walked back to the counter. She noticed he kept glancing around, sometimes at the walls, sometimes at the old piano. He stayed for a long time. After lunch, when the other customers had left, he was still there, sipping coffee and scribbling in his notebook. Emily cleared nearby tables and hummed quietly to herself, an old tune she barely remembered, something her father used to play when she was little. She thought no one could hear her, but he did. He looked up again, curious. "Is that Chopin?" he asked suddenly. Emily froze, not sure how to respond. I think so. I'm not sure." "You play?" She hesitated, embarrassed. "I used to, a long time ago." He closed his notebook and leaned back, looking thoughtful. "That piano over there, does it still work?" She shrugged. "I don't know. No one's played it since I started here." He smiled again. "Why don't you try?" Her eyes widened. "What? Oh no, I couldn't." "Why not?" She gave a nervous laugh. "It's been years. I'm probably terrible now." He looked serious. "I'll make you a deal. Play something. If you impress me, I'll leave you $1,000 tip." Emily stared at him, confused. "You're joking." "I'm not. Just one song." She looked around the empty diner. Her heart pounded. Why would this stranger challenge her like this? Was he testing her? Making fun of her? But something about his tone told her he meant it. "I'm not good enough," she said quietly. "Let me decide that," he replied, his voice calm. "Come on, just one song." Emily looked at the piano. Her hands felt cold. She hadn't played since she was a teenager. What if she messed up? But what if she didn't? What if, just for once, she stopped hiding? She took a deep breath and walked slowly toward the piano. Her legs felt heavy, her hands trembling. She pulled out the bench and sat down. The keys were dusty, a few chipped, but they were all there. She lifted the cover and placed her fingers on the keys. They felt familiar, like coming home after a long, long time. She closed her eyes. She didn't try to think of a difficult piece. She didn't try to show off. She just played what her heart remembered. And as the first notes filled the quiet room, something inside her came alive. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with part 2 in the same style and length. As the last note of Emily's quiet tune faded away into the empty diner, she slowly opened her eyes. Her fingers were still resting on the keys, slightly trembling. She hadn't even realized how tightly she'd been holding her breath. There was no applause, no laughter, no words. Just silence and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. For a second, she was sure she had made a fool of herself. The old piano sounded a little out of tune, and she had stumbled slightly in the middle. Maybe she should have said no. But when she turned around, the stranger in the booth was no longer sitting back casually with his notebook. He had leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes wide with something close to wonder. Emily noticed his lips were slightly parted, as if he had forgotten to breathe too. For a few seconds he didn't say anything at all. Then he slowly stood up, walked over to her, and smiled. "That was beautiful." Emily laughed nervously and shook her head. "It was just something simple. I don't even know if I got it right." "You did," he said. "You played it like someone who's felt every note. That's what matters." She looked down, unsure what to say. Compliments always made her uncomfortable, especially from someone like him. He looked like he belonged in an office building on the top floor of a glass tower, not in a roadside diner with sticky tables and a broken jukebox. He held out a business card, but Emily didn't reach for it right away. "I meant what I said," he added. "You impressed me. More than you know." She finally took the card and read the name. James Thornton. There was a logo underneath, something about music and media. The card was thick, expensive, the kind you only see in movies. She looked up at him, eyebrows raised. "You're in the music business?" she asked. "Sort of," he said. "I own a few companies, some tech, some music. I fund artists, support talent, that kind of thing." Emily blinked. "And you just came into this diner by chance?" He nodded. "Car trouble. I stopped here to wait for the mechanic." He grinned. "Guess I was meant to." Emily gave a small smile, still unsure how to feel. It all seemed strange. Too lucky to be real. A millionaire just happened to walk into her diner and hear her play the piano for the first time in years? James glanced at the piano, then back at her. "Do you play often?" She shook her head. "Not since I was a kid. We had to sell our piano after my dad passed away." "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You clearly haven't lost the gift." She laughed again, but this time it sounded less nervous. "I thought I had. I thought that part of me was gone." James smiled and walked back to his booth. He took out his phone and typed something quickly, then looked at her. "I recorded part of your playing, by the way. I hope that's okay. Just audio. No video." Emily's eyes widened. "You what?" "Don't worry, it's not online or anything. I just wanted to remember it." She didn't know whether to feel flattered or anxious. No one had ever wanted to record her before. She had spent most of her life trying to blend into the background, not stand out. James sipped his coffee, then set his phone on the table. "I meet a lot of people. I've heard a lot of musicians. But something about the way you played, it wasn't just skill. It had heart. You can't fake that." Emily looked down at the floor. "It's just something my dad taught me. I never had lessons, never went to school for it." "That makes it even more impressive," James said. "Natural talent is rare. And when it's real, it doesn't go away. It just waits." The bell above the diner door rang, and a couple walked in, shaking water off their umbrellas. Emily quickly returned to her role, grabbed her notepad, and stepped back into waitress mode. She took their order, brought them menus, filled their glasses. But her mind was somewhere else. Every time she passed the corner booth, she felt James's eyes on her. Not in a creepy way, but thoughtful, like he was trying to figure her out. After the lunch crowd thinned again, he stood up, put on his coat, and walked to the counter to pay. "Thanks for the coffee," he said, sliding a few bills across the counter. "And for the music." She nodded politely. "Thanks for listening." He paused, then said, "Would you consider coming to the city sometime? I could set up a real piano, a proper space, just to see what you can really do." Emily stared at him. "I don't know." "No pressure," he said. "Just think about it. Call me if you're interested. My number's on the card." And with that, he left. After he walked out, Emily noticed the cash on the counter. Her eyes widened. It wasn't a few dollars. It was a stack of $100 bills. Exactly 10 of them. $1,000. Just like he promised. She looked outside. His car was already pulling away. Her hands were shaking as she counted the money again. It felt unreal. She tucked it into the register drawer, then stood there in silence, staring at the piano. Her heart was racing. The rest of the day passed, in a blur. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept turning the card over in her hands, reading the name again and again. James Thornton. It sounded important. She finally searched him online and found page after page of articles. He really was a millionaire, CEO of a large entertainment company, known for discovering unknown talents and launching careers. There were interviews, photos, awards. He wasn't just wealthy. He was respected. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, stunned. Of all the places he could have stopped, he chose her diner. And of all the waitresses he could have spoken to, he listened. To her hum. What were the odds? The next morning, she showed the card to her best friend and co-worker, Tara, who nearly dropped her coffee mug. "Emily, do you realize what this means?" Tara whispered, wide-eyed. "He could help you. Like, really help you." "But what if I mess up?" Emily asked. "What if he's just being nice?" Tara shook her head. "Girl, I've known you for years. I've heard you hum songs that make me cry, and that's without even touching a piano. You were made for this. You've just been stuck here hiding." Emily felt a strange mix of fear and excitement building inside her. Part of her wanted to throw the card away, forget the whole thing. The other part, the part that still remembered sitting beside her dad while he played, wanted to believe that maybe this was her moment. Over the next few days, she kept replaying that moment at the piano in her head. The way it felt to sit there again. The silence of the room. The look on James's face. A week later, she finally picked up the phone. Her voice was shaky as she dialed the number. It rang twice, then connected. "James Thornton," a calm voice answered. "Hi, this is Emily. From the diner." There was a pause, then a warm tone. "Emily, I was hoping you'd call." "I've been thinking," she said softly, "about what you said, about the city." "I'm glad," James replied, "because I haven't stopped thinking about you either." Emily blushed. "I mean, about the music. Not me." "I know what you meant," he said, laughing gently. "So, do you want to come down? We'll take it slow. No pressure. Just you, a grand piano, and a quiet room." Emily nodded to herself. "Okay. Yes, I'll come." James gave her the address and a time. She wrote it down carefully, then sat in silence for a long while after the call ended. That night, she stood in front of her mirror and stared at her reflection. She didn't look like a pianist. She looked like a tired waitress with bags under her eyes and a closet full of second-hand clothes. But when she closed her eyes, she could still feel the keys under her fingers, still hear the music in her mind. And for the first time in years, Emily Carter dared to imagine something more. The morning of her trip to the city, Emily woke up earlier than usual. She barely slept the night before. Her small apartment was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the distant sound of cars on the wet street below. Her bag was already packed, though there wasn't much to pack. A few clothes, a small notebook where she sometimes wrote down her thoughts, and the card James had given her. She had looked at that card every day since he left the diner. She stood, in front of the mirror, brushing her hair and trying to calm the nervous feeling in her chest. She wasn't used to traveling. She had never been to the city alone before. Her world had always been small: the diner, the grocery store, the laundromat, and her apartment. Now she was going somewhere unfamiliar to meet someone powerful who had seen something in her she wasn't sure still existed. She took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was doing this. Not for money, not even for fame, but because deep down she missed music. She missed the way it made her feel, alive, brave, free. She took the bus to the train station. The sky was cloudy again, like it had been the day James walked into her life. As the train pulled away from her town, Emily watched the trees and buildings pass by like scenes from a movie. Her reflection in the window looked nervous but also curious, like someone who didn't know what was coming, but was finally ready to find out. When she arrived at the city, everything felt fast and loud. Tall buildings surrounded her, people rushed past with purpose, and cars honked at every corner. She felt small and out of place, but she held James's card tightly in her hand and followed the directions he had given her. The studio was on the 15th floor of a tall building made of glass and steel. The elevator ride up felt longer than it really was. When the doors opened, she stepped into a quiet, modern hallway. A receptionist greeted her with a kind smile and led her to a large room at the end. Inside was a beautiful grand piano, shiny, black, and perfect. It stood in the middle of the room like a treasure waiting to be discovered. The walls were covered in soft panels to absorb sound, and large windows let in natural light. Emily had never seen anything like it. It didn't feel like a studio. It felt like a sanctuary. James was already there, standing near the piano, dressed in a simple shirt and blazer. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "You made it," he said warmly. Emily nodded. "I almost turned back." "I'm glad you didn't." He walked over and pulled the piano bench out for her. "Take your time," he said. "Play whatever feels right." Emily slowly approached the piano. Her heart was pounding again, just like it did at the diner. But this time, there was something different in the air. She sat down, ran her fingers lightly over the keys, and closed her eyes. She began with something soft, a piece she remembered from childhood. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Then she moved into something her father used to play on rainy evenings. As her hands danced across the keys, her nervousness slowly faded. She didn't think about James. She didn't think about the city. She didn't even think about the diner. She just played. When she stopped, the room was silent again. James stood very still, watching her. "You really are special," he said quietly. "Do you know that?" Emily looked away, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to praise. "I want to help you," he continued. "If you'll let me." "No contracts, no pressure. Just lessons, time in the studio, maybe a few small performances when you're ready. You deserve to be heard." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Why me? There must be so many better players out there." "Maybe," he said, "but they don't play like you. Your music tells a story. People don't forget that." She stared at the piano. It still didn't feel real. Just a week ago, she was wiping down tables and pouring coffee. Now she was being offered a second chance at something she thought she had lost forever. James gave her space. He didn't push. He didn't act like a businessman. He acted like someone who genuinely believed in her. And slowly she began to believe in herself too. Over the next few weeks, Emily came back to the studio again and again. James introduced her to a kind, elderly piano teacher named Clara, who had worked with some of the city's most talented musicians. Clara was patient and warm. She didn't criticize Emily for her mistakes. Instead, she helped her grow, note by note, song by song. Emily practiced for hours. She had calluses on her fingers. Her back ached from sitting at the piano. So long, but she didn't care. She was finally doing something that made her feel alive again. One day, after a long session, Clara turned to her and said, "You have something inside you that can move people. Don't ever doubt it." Emily smiled, but part of her still couldn't fully accept the compliments. She had spent too many years in silence. Too many years convincing herself that her dreams didn't matter. But each day at the piano made the silence smaller and the dream louder. James watched her progress with quiet pride. He didn't treat her like a project. He treated her like an artist. He arranged for her to perform at a small charity event. Nothing big, just a short set in front of a small audience. Emily almost said no. The idea of playing in front of strangers terrified her. But Clara encouraged her, and James promised to sit in the front row. On the night of the event, Emily wore a simple black dress. Her hands were shaking as she sat at the piano, but as soon as her fingers touched the keys, everything else disappeared. She played from the heart, just like always. The crowd was silent, hanging on every note. When she finished, there was a pause, and then loud applause. People stood. Some even had tears in their eyes. Emily felt something deep in her chest. Not pride, not fame, but peace. She had done it. She had found her voice again. After the show, a woman approached her in the hallway. She looked to be in her 50s, dressed in a navy blue coat. "You don't know me," the woman said, "but I lost my husband a year ago. Your music tonight. It reminded me of the way he used to smile when we danced in our kitchen. I just wanted to thank you." Emily didn't know what to say. She hugged the woman gently, tears welling in her eyes. That night, she sat on a bench, outside the event hall, looking up at the stars between the buildings. James sat beside her. "You were amazing," he said softly. She turned to him. "Thank you. For everything." He smiled. "All I did was listen. You did the rest." Emily thought back to the day he walked into the diner. If she hadn't been humming that tune, if he hadn't asked her to play, if she had said no, none of this would have happened. "It's strange," she said, "how one small moment can change your whole life." James nodded. "Most people are too afraid to take that moment. You weren't." Emily thought about all the times she had ignored the piano in the diner, all the times she had told herself she wasn't good enough. She had wasted so many years hiding, but not anymore. She didn't know what the future held. There were still bills to pay, still hard days ahead. But for the first time in a long time, she had something more than just work and routine. She had music, and the whole world was finally listening. Emily's life began to feel like it was changing faster than she could keep up. Each day brought something new. One week, she was still getting used to the quiet comfort of the studio piano. The next week, she was being introduced to small music, circles and gatherings where people shared songs, stories, and ideas like gifts. James and Clara never forced her to do more than she was ready for, but they gently pushed her just enough to help her grow. Emily was no longer just a waitress with a quiet talent hidden inside. People in the local music community had started to notice her. Her performance at the charity event had been shared online, and it reached more people than she ever expected. A short video of her playing was posted on social media. The soft, emotional tune touched hearts. Comments poured in. Strangers writing about how her music made them cry, how it reminded them of someone they had lost, how it gave them peace. She read every single comment. Some made her smile, others made her cry. But all of them helped her believe little by little that she really did have something to offer, that she wasn't dreaming too big after all. Back in her hometown, word spread quickly. Tara, her best friend and co-worker at the diner, couldn't stop telling customers, "That's my girl. I told her she was special." The regulars who had once seen Emily quietly clean tables now looked at her with new eyes. They had always liked her, but now they were proud of her. And more than that, they were inspired. Emily's mother, who had always been quiet and cautious, called her one evening and said, "Your father would be so proud. I wish he could have seen you now." That simple sentence meant more to Emily than any praise from strangers. Her father had been the one to teach her the first notes on a piano. His dream had been to see her play for the world. Even after he passed away, Emily had felt his love in every key she touched. Despite the growing attention, Emily stayed humble. She still helped at the diner sometimes when they were short-staffed. She still took the bus. She still wore the same coat she had owned for years. Fame didn't matter to her. What mattered was the music and the way it connected her to people. One afternoon, James invited her to a small recording studio across the city. It was different from the one with the big windows and the grand piano. This one was darker, cozier, filled with equipment and soft lighting. Inside was a sound engineer named Malik, a quiet man with kind eyes and a deep love for music. James explained, "I want you to record one of your pieces, something from the heart. No pressure, just a simple recording, something people can keep listening to." Emily had never been in a recording studio before. The headphones, the microphone near the piano, the glass window with Malik watching, it all made her feel nervous again. But James smiled and said, "Just close your eyes and pretend you're back at the diner." So she did. She played a tune she had written herself, a mix of memory and hope. It started soft and slow, like a rainy afternoon, then slowly grew into something brighter, something that felt like a sunrise. It was a piece she had started long ago when her father was still alive, but she had never finished it. Now, she did. When she finished playing, she opened her eyes to see Malik nodding behind the glass. James stood in the corner, arms crossed, his face full of quiet pride. They played the recording back for her. For the first time in her life, Emily heard her own music played back through studio speakers. It sounded real. It sounded beautiful. James said, "This is the one. We'll release this." Emily's eyes widened. "Release it? Like, to the public?" He nodded. "Just online? Let the world hear it." She felt nervous again. What if people didn't like it? What if they said mean things? But James reassured her, "Your music already touched people before. This will just give them more of you." So after some careful work and editing, they released the song online under the name Echoes of Home. Within days, the track was shared thousands of times. Bloggers wrote about it. Music lovers downloaded it. People from all over the world messaged her online, thanking her for the peace her music brought into their lives. And then came something unexpected. One morning, James walked into the studio with a big smile and a sparkle in his eyes. "Guess who called?" he asked. Emily looked up from her notebook. "Who?" "A music producer from a famous label. He heard your track. He wants to meet." Emily's heart skipped. "Me? Why?" James laughed. "Because he thinks you're the real deal." And he's right. Emily wasn't sure she was ready. Everything was moving so fast. One moment she was scared to even play in front of a few strangers, and now big names in the music world were interested in her. James saw her hesitation. "It's okay to be scared, but this is a good thing. You don't have to sign anything. Just meet them, talk, listen, then decide." So Emily agreed. She met with the producer, a woman named Natalie who had worked with well-known pianists and singers across the country. Natalie was sharp, confident, and honest. "You have something rare," she told Emily. "Your music is pure. It's emotional. It's not flashy, but it makes people feel something. That's what we need more of." They didn't talk about money or contracts that day. They just talked about music, what it meant, how it helped people. Emily felt at ease with Natalie, and that surprised her. Later, when she and James were walking outside, Emily turned to him and said, "I never thought I'd even be in a conversation like that." "You deserve it," he replied. "You've worked for it. This isn't luck, Emily. This is talent and heart." Emily smiled, though part of her still couldn't believe all this was real. She went home that night and sat at her small keyboard. It wasn't anything like the grand pianos in the studio. The keys were old and a little sticky, but it was where she had written most of her music. She stared out the window and let her fingers move, not thinking, just feeling. She played a new piece, one that told the story of a quiet girl in a small town, working long hours at a diner, humming songs to herself while scrubbing tables. Girl who had almost forgotten how much she loved music, until someone reminded her, and she realized something important. Her journey wasn't just about becoming famous, it was about rediscovering the part of herself that had been buried under years of doubt and fear. It was about sharing her story through music so others wouldn't feel so alone. She remembered the woman who said her song reminded her of dancing with her late husband. She remembered the little girl at the charity event who hugged her and said, "I want to play piano like you one day." She remembered her dad, sitting beside her on their old couch, tapping the rhythm on his knee while she played on a broken keyboard. These memories became her inspiration. James helped her plan a small concert, her first solo show. Not in a huge stadium, just a cozy venue with soft lighting, about 100 seats, and a real stage. Emily chose the songs herself. Some were original pieces. Others were new versions of the lullabies her father used to hum. She invited people from her town, her old co-workers, Clara, and even Malik and Natalie. On the night of the concert, as she stood behind the curtain listening to the quiet chatter of the audience, she felt that old nervousness rise in her chest. But this time, she welcomed it. Because it meant something real was about to happen. When she walked on stage, the room went silent. She sat at the piano and looked out at the crowd. In the front row, she saw James smiling, Tara waving excitedly, Clara with her hand on her heart. Even her mom had made the trip, wiping tears before Emily even began. Emily took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to play. And with each note, she told her story. The applause filled the room like a warm wave. Emily stood up slowly from the piano bench and looked out at the audience. Some people were on their feet. Others were wiping their eyes. Her heart was still racing from the final song she had played, a song that held pieces of her life, her struggles, her dreams, and her father's memory. For a moment, she just stood there, unsure what to do with all the emotions inside her. Then she smiled. It wasn't a big, showy smile. It was small and soft, but it was full of something deeper than happiness. It was full of peace. She walked off the stage, her hands still trembling slightly. Backstage, James was waiting for her with open arms. "You did it," he said, hugging her tightly. Emily could barely speak. She nodded, her eyes full of tears. "I didn't think I could." "But you did," he said. "You didn't just play. You told a story. You changed people tonight." Emily had never believed that music could really change people. But now, seeing the crowd's faces, hearing the honest applause, she realized that music, when it comes from the heart, can reach people in a way that words cannot. It could comfort someone who was hurting. It could remind someone of love they had lost. It could even make a tired waitress believe in herself again. After the show, a small crowd gathered backstage. Some were people from her town. Others were new fans who had found her through her first recording. One woman said, "I drove 3 hours just to see you tonight." A young man with a walking cane said, "Your music helped me through my recovery after an accident. Thank you." Emily listened to every word. She shook every hand. She didn't know how to handle so much kindness, but she accepted it with all the humility in her heart. She wasn't famous. She wasn't a star. She was just someone who had found her voice again, and was using it to help others feel something real. In the days that followed, her performance was shared on social media. Someone had filmed part of the concert and posted a video online with the caption, "Waitress turned pianist leaves crowd in tears." The video went viral. Thousands of people shared it. Millions watched it. News outlets picked it up. Journalists started calling James and asking for interviews. Emily's name began to appear in articles and on websites that once felt too big and far away for someone like her. One day, she was sitting at her favorite cafe, just a small place with old wooden chairs and soft jazz playing in the background, when the owner said, "You're on TV." She looked up at the screen on the wall. A news anchor was talking about her. They showed clips of her playing. They told her story. About the diner, the piano, the mysterious millionaire who had changed her life. At first, Emily felt embarrassed. She didn't like attention. But then she saw the comments below the video. So many people were inspired. Some said they had started learning piano again because of her. Others said they finally had the courage to chase a forgotten dream. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about what her journey meant to others. Despite the attention, Emily stayed, grounded. She still practiced every day. She still visited Clara, her kind teacher who had become like family. She still called her mom every Sunday. And she still took long walks alone to clear her mind and find new melodies in the world around her. James helped her carefully choose what to say yes to, Offers were coming from everywhere: concerts, radio interviews, music labels. But they agreed not to rush. They wanted to protect the heart of her music, not lose it in a storm of fame. One afternoon, as they sat together in the studio, James asked her, "What do you want to do next?" Emily thought for a moment. Then she said, "I want to write an album. Not for money, not for fame. Just something honest, something that tells the whole story." James smiled. "Then that's what we'll do." She began writing new music, each piece like a chapter. One song was about her father and the old couch where they used to sit together. Another was about Tara, the friend who always believed in her. One piece was about the day she almost gave up, and how a stranger in a suit saw something in her she didn't see in herself. Each note was filled with truth. Recording the album took time. Sometimes she stayed up late in the studio, playing in the dark with only a small lamp lighting the keys. Sometimes she cried in the middle of a song because it brought back memories she hadn't faced in years. But she never stopped, because every song was a piece of who she was. James brought in talented musicians to support her: cellists, violinists, guitarists. But the piano was always at the center. That was her voice. When the album was finally finished, they named it The Other Side of Silence. It was a perfect title. Emily had spent years in silence, keeping her music hidden, her heart quiet, her dreams buried. But now she had found her voice again. And on the other side of that silence, there was music. The album was released online. They didn't spend a lot of money on advertising. They let the music speak for itself. And it did. The response was overwhelming. People from all over the world sent messages. Fans shared their favorite songs. Music bloggers called the album a quiet masterpiece. One reviewer wrote, "You don't just listen to Emily's music, you feel it." She was invited to perform on television. She was invited to speak at music schools. She was asked to teach young pianists. Everywhere she went, people listened. And more than that, they connected. One day, while visiting a school in a quiet part of the city, a little girl came up to her and said, "I'm scared to play in front of people. But when I watch you, I feel brave." Emily knelt down, held the girl's hand, and said, "I was scared too. But playing from the heart is always brave." That moment reminded her why she had started playing again, not for fame, not for applause, but to remind others, especially the quiet ones, that their voices mattered. Months passed, and life became full and beautiful in a way she had never imagined. But she never forgot where she came from. She still visited the diner from time to time. She and Tara would sit in the corner booth and laugh about old customers and spilled coffee. The piano in the corner had been cleaned and tuned. Sometimes Emily would play a quick tune before leaving. The people in her hometown were proud of her, not because she was famous now, but because she never changed who she was. She was still Emily, the girl with kind eyes, a gentle spirit, and a deep love for music. One evening, James invited her to dinner. They sat on a rooftop overlooking the city. Lights sparkled below them like stars on earth. They talked about everything they had been through together, from that first night at the diner to the concert, the album, the fame. "You changed my life," Emily said. James shook his head. "You changed your life. I just opened a door." She looked at him with gratitude. "Still, thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." He smiled. "You were always meant to be heard." That night, Emily went home and wrote a final piece for her next album. It was soft, almost like a lullaby. It told the story of a quiet girl, a worn-out piano, a stranger with a challenge, and the sound of hope returning. As she played it, she realized something beautiful. Her story wasn't just about music. It was about second chances, about courage, about how sometimes the smallest moment, a song in a diner, a stranger asking you to play, can become the turning point in a life. She had once been invisible, but now the whole world was listening. And more importantly, she was listening too. To her heart, to her dreams, and to the music that had always been waiting inside her.